Hi, I'm eXo. Thank you for all the great feedback on the video so far. One thing that's come to my attention is we have a lot of new people, and that's a great thing. But it also means that we have folks who maybe aren't real clear on what eXoDOS is. So, about 2 years ago I did a video on what eXoDOS was, but I'm going to take another stab at it, and this time I'm going to try to make it short. I'm going to keep it succinct, and I'm going to update it because eXoDOS changes. What it was to me 2 years ago is different than what it was to me 15 years ago. One thing that has never changed for me is eXoDOS is preservation through playability. My personal belief is you can take all the games you want and you can put them on a disk, on a hard drive, and you can put them in a vault. But if you can't get to them, if I can't get to them, it's like saying cheesecake exists, but you can't have it. It's like saying your favorite movie is in a vault, but you can't watch it. It doesn't do anyone any good. We can't experience it. We can't learn from it. There's no point in putting it in a vault. And there's a metaphorical vault here we're talking about as well. Not just museums and galleries and such, but the vault of not being usable. DOS is not like your typical platform like the NES or Super Nintendo, like a game console. In those cases, you might have had some revisions of hardware, but ultimately they were all compatible with each other. You could take a Super Nintendo game and plug it into any Super Nintendo, and it was going to work. You cannot put any DOS game on any DOS computer and have it work. It might be too fast, it might be too slow, it might not have the right graphics card, it might not have the right video card. There are so many variables, and that's the tip of the iceberg. eXoDOS was designed because the number of people who know DOS goes down every year. I just said that the other day in a different video. The number of people who know how to use DOSBox is not exactly climbing, and these are two prerequisites for getting games to run. If you want to play 3D ball, you can't. Say you go online, you find a copy of it, you download it. You have a zip file full of different files. You got an exe file and you got several configuration files, but what do you do with that? You try to run it on your Windows machine, nothing happens, or maybe you get an error message. So you go online and you Google how to emulate DOS. And you find DOSBox, which, if you are not familiar with it, is the emulator that is primarily used. However, there are multiple branches of DOSBox. Some are good for different sound cards. Some have printer support. Some are better at networking. Some have really great filters on them for making your CRT look good, specifically staging. You're kind of out of luck unless you have the time or the previous knowledge to set it up. eXoDOS is designed so that you don't have to know these things. Now, we want you to learn them if you want. That's why we've added books. And these books will teach you how to use DOS, how to program in DOS, how to get around in it. It's why we've added magazines. These magazines are educational. They tell you all kinds of stuff that you wouldn't otherwise know. I've added soundtracks, so while you're learning all that stuff, you can listen to some good music. The catalogs are here not just because it's a great nostalgia bomb to go through them, but they help us locate stuff that otherwise was never released, or maybe is missing. These are time warps into a different time period. This is not just a bunch of games. Now, that's what it was when I was coming through the scene. In 2004, 2005, I remember there being a pack called the DOS Collection. It had about 8,000 files in it, but a lot of them were duplications. You could find Alone in the Dark in there, and it'd be in there like 7 times. And there'd be like one installed, but like the guy installed it to a weird folder, so it didn't run unless you read the configuration file and found that folder and made that folder and then moved the game into that folder. And it was missing the installer, so you couldn't reconfigure it. And maybe 1 out of the 8 versions had the installer still. So then you set up DOSBox, you mount it to, a floppy drive, you install it, you bring it over, and hey, now you're finally playing Alone in the Dark. But you had to dig through a lot of trash to get to that point. That's not eXoDOS. eXoDOS is a giant collection of files, but every single one of those files has a configuration file that tells DOSBox how to run that game, how fast it should be, what kind of computer did it used to run, what kind of video card, what kind of sound card, there's how much RAM. If it's a game like Seventh Guest, we're mounting multiple CDs so that as you play the game, you can hit Control F4 to switch CDs. And no, you don't have to memorize that. Any game that requires you to switch CDs, it will tell you. We're going through here and taking games and saying, okay, these 29 games were compatible with 3D effects card. So we have gotten these games running both with and without 3D effects. If I launch any of these games, it will ask me which version I want to use. We've gone through and set up the Gravis Ultrasound, the Roland MT32. Games that had printer support, the Sound Canvas, Real Magic MPEG decoder. These games right here, I'm particularly proud of. This was a major project for me. In 2020, I think I did this. 326 games that are all set up to be played remote multiplayer. Maybe you had a LAN party back in the day, or you've heard the term LAN party. And you had 4 people, or maybe even 8 people that all played Doom together. It is one of those things that defined a generation for the people who did it. Well, if I fire Doom up right now, it's going to ask me, do I want to play multiplayer or not? And if I say yes, it'll say, do I want to host it? Or do I want to join someone else's game? And if I say host, it gives me my IP address, and then I can give that to anyone that wants to join me. What's great about that, what's really cool about that, is back in the day it was a LAN party, right? With a party, you all had to be in the same room. This is over IPX. It's shunting everything out over the your IPX over the internet. So when we first tested it, we had a staff member in Australia. I'm here in Texas. Another guy over in Canada, and a 4th guy in Germany. And we all played against each other. And it was like being in the same room. I'm particularly proud of these games because it's not easy to get DOS era games running multiplayer. They are all different. There is no standard. But it's done for you. When you launch the game, it will not only set it up, set it up for you. It gives you step-by-step instructions. Okay, when you go in the game, click on this. Now go to multiplayer. Pick null modem or pick IPX. Click host now. I mean, it's right there. You don't have to guess because we had to guess to figure it out. The point of all of this is to make it super simple for someone who either is super familiar with DOS or has never heard of DOS before to come sit down and play a game. I've told this anecdote before, but back in 2004, I sat down and I wanted to play Discworld. And I couldn't get it running. And so I looked up DOSBox, and it still wouldn't run in DOSBox. I couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. And I think I was up till 4:30 in the morning, and I finally got the game started, but it didn't quite sound right because my sound card was off. And I went to bed. And I never got around to playing it. I spent my whole night setting it up instead of playing it. And so then one day I sat down and I was like, you know what? I've got a whole shelf full of adventure games. I'm going to set them all up. And so I focused on that. I set all my adventure games up, so I'd never have to deal with that again. If I just sat down, I could play a game. Well, I finished that around 2017, 2018. And that was eXoDOS Volume 1 Adventure. And I have not sat down and played those games either. I mean, I play games here and there, but I've been adding more and more and more. I went from adventure games to RPGs to strategy, and then from that to simulations. And finally, I capped it all up with eXoDOS Volume 5 Action. And of course, Doom was the centerpiece of that. That's what everyone wanted. I didn't set out to try to capture all of DOS when I started. I set out to capture my personal collection of adventure games. But no one else had done it yet. And there had been a lot of attempts. There's the remains of 100, 150 different DOS projects over the years that started and stopped and started and stopped. And I can tell you the main reason why. It requires ridiculous hubris to think you can do it. It's incredibly tedious. You have to be super stubborn because you'll get bored and you'll be playing a lot of bad games. But it's really rewarding too. Especially when I put out these packs and these videos and I see how many people are enjoying them. When I can scroll through this list and know I've started every single one of these games. I've touched every single comp file. And I'm proud of the time I put into it. But I'm more proud of all the people who have joined and helped this project. eXoDOS is not just preservation through playability anymore. eXoDOS is an ethos that a bunch of people on Discord have joined in to help with. eXoDOS is no longer just English games. It's German, it's French, it's Polish, it's Spanish. eXoDOS is no longer just... Preservation through playability is not just DOS games. It's Windows 3X, it's Apple IIGS, and soon Apple IIe. And eventually Windows 9X. Exo projects and eXoDOS is a passion for something that is not easy to preserve, which makes it that much more important to preserve. Yes, you can go out and you can buy Hexen on Steam or Good Old Games and you can play it. But when you start it, it won't ask you if you want to play it with a MT32 card or a Sound Canvas 55. It doesn't prompt you and say, do you want to play multiplayer, and then give you all the information you need to do that. Nobody out there has released something like eXoWAD that has all the DOS WADs for the top 100 DOS WADs for Doom all loaded up. One video I've got coming out real soon here is eXoZZT, a collection of most of the best user-created ZZT levels, and one that I don't even have a title screen for, it's so new, is eXoHog. eXoHog is a project that Peric helped me out with from Discord, and he went through and pulled in what he considered and what was listed as some of the best, if not the best, descent levels. And we built an entire menu system around them so that you can load and launch, load and go. If your descent needs to be modified for the game to work, it modifies descent for you, and when you exit, it puts it back the way it was. It's plug and play, go. eXoDOS's passion for taking these games and preserving them and presenting them the way they deserve to be presented. King's Quest IV was composed on a Roland MT32 card. If you go buy King's Quest IV from any retailer right now online, in the few places it's sold, you will get the SCI version, no option for the AGI version. You will get the EGA graphics that look VGA, but they're not. And you'll get an AdLib Sound Blaster driver. If you were to go buy these games off any of those storefronts, you do not get any other driver files. You don't get the installer that lets you go in and modify the settings. They're not preserved. They're presented, but they're not preserved. And what happens if we allow games like this to not be preserved? What if we rely on Good Old Games and Steam and all these other storefronts to preserve these for us? Well, I can tell you what happens. And 97.2% of the games that are in eXoDOS don't get preserved because they're not commercially available anywhere. And of the 2.7% that are commercially available, you get the version they want to give you. You get Sound Blaster only. You get the VGA version, not the CGA version or the Tandy version or the PC Junior version, if there was one. You don't get the setup files. You don't get the driver files. Imagine if a movie came out and they've cut half an hour out of it. There's only an hour left. There was a point where there was a DVD that had extras. It had behind-the-scenes footage. Like Lord of the Rings. It has what? Like, the movie itself is 3 hours long. Extended version is 4 hours long. And then there's like another 4 to 5 hours of content on the extended disc. Behind the scenes. And you know that exists. You had that version. You've watched that version. You love that version. But DVD players don't exist anymore. You can't access your version anymore. And pretty soon, you can't buy it anymore. But 20 years later, someone comes along and says, okay, The Lord of the Rings, Extended Edition, now available. But when you go click on it, it's not the Extended Edition. It's the 3-hour version. And the other hour of footage, it's nowhere to be found. And it's DVD quality, not Blu-ray quality. Or 4K. Instead of Dolby surround sound, it's been presented in stereo. Not horrible, but it's not surround sound. The 4 or 5 hours of extras, nowhere to be seen. The cool DVD menus you can click through to find all that stuff, they're gone. I consider that a pretty bare bones release, and I would not in any part, any shape, way, or any way, shape, or form consider that to be preserved. There's an argument. Excuse me. I get tongue-tied talking about this stuff because I'm passionate about it. There is an argument to be made that it's destructive. That when you put that version out and you remove the other version, you're depriving people of the original version while at the same time replacing it. I cannot tell you how many times I have gone to find a game online that has not been preserved, and the copy I find is hacked, cracked, missing files, and that's all we can find. There's not an original one out there. And so we put it on our eBay watch list and we wait sometimes years. And sometimes we have really great moments where someone finds it, we buy it, we copy it, we get it down, and we get it running the way it was meant to be seen. But there's always been a list of games that we can't find. There's always been a list of games that we know are missing the EGA files, but we can only find the CGA files. Python comes across that constantly working on the project. Smiling Spectre is constantly finding files and saying, hey, the version we have is missing this sound adapter driver, but this one has it. And we bring it in, and suddenly we hear the game in a way we've never heard it before. Preservation means not only putting that disc somewhere safe, but presenting it. So you, me, our kids, our parents can enjoy them the way that they were meant to be enjoyed. That is what eXoDOS is. I know it looks like a front end with a bunch of art and metadata. It's that too, because a folder full of games is only a portion of the story. If I click on Advanced Civilization, I can hear it, I can see it. I can see what sound cards it supports here. I can read about it. I can right click on it and see I've got the cards it came with. I can read the manual if I want to go over to media. That's preservation to me. The goal is to make it as fun to go through this list of games and look at them and explore them as it is to play them. I have a hard time explaining what eXoDOS is, especially succinctly, as you can tell. I've got no idea how long I've been talking. I get lost in it. eXoDOS is MS-DOS in its most presentable form that I can imagine. And every time I say that, we come up with some other way, some other thing we can add to it to make it better. eXoDOS never ends. It never stops evolving is what I mean by that. We keep finding ways to make it better, and we will. Because we have passionate people, and to each one of us, eXoDOS might be slightly different, but it is a unified goal, and that is to give this platform the justice it deserves, the respect it deserves. And in that process, we've developed utilities and tools that are amazing at emulating and presenting a lot of platforms. I heard talk recently of a fellow who had made an emulation engine that supposedly could handle any game. And it made me laugh a little bit because ultimately it's a way of taking existing emulators and just kind of shunting them into a unified front end. Almost like RetroArch, but without the plugins. While I will not claim that my projects are anything like that, what they are is they are unified. They are normalized. They're clean. And hopefully they're fun. What is eXoDOS? eXoDOS is preservation through playability. It's a passion for these games. It's fun. I hope. I will follow this up with videos about a lot of the things I talked about, more deep dives into these sound cards and examples of what they sound like. Back-end information on how we actually do stuff on the back end for those interested in that. A lot of really fun stuff is coming, but I wanted to stop and just talk about what eXoDOS was for a moment. And some people ask, how do I get eXoDOS? Where is it? When does it come out? while I have not mentioned the exact release date of eXoDOS 6 yet, as soon as it goes live, I'll announce it on my Discord, and it will show up on my website. Our website here is retroexo.com. It's got a dash in there. You click on the computer, and this has confused a few people before. They start trying to type, and nothing happens down there. That's just an animated GIF. But you can click. You'll see all the projects listed here on the right-hand side, including other pages. You can go to the eXoDOS page. When version 6 comes out, it will be right here. In the meantime, if you want version 5, we've got the full releases right here. There is a physical version, however, I think it's sold out at this point. There will be a physical version of 6. And in case you have any questions about it, there's no profit to be made on this project. I nor anybody else on the project benefit financially from selling these. The cost of the physical versions that I sell, about 90% of it goes towards the actual cardboard, manuals, the enamel pins, all the printing costs. We have to print pretty low runs. It's not like Kickstarter where I can get 1,000 made. I do them in runs of about 100. I pay for that out of my pocket. I then, with the money that we make off them, I pay that off slowly. And the math I've done on it is if I sell 100 of them, then about 10% or $5 of each box goes, that's profit. That profit goes into a fund, along with, you'll notice we have a project donations down here. I'm not asking anyone here to donate or buy a box. Like I said, the boxes are sold out, so this is not an advertisement for anything. But that $5 goes to a fund, and we use that to buy games that are missing from the packs. I keep a totally separate bank account for it. I keep it all completely separate. There is no goal here to make money off this. And to be really clear, there's no games in this when you buy it. You get a box, you get a manual, you get a catalog, an enamel pin, I sign a registration card for you, and there's a sticker that says it looks like a floppy disk. The point of selling the box is there's a lot of collectors involved in the project that like to have something on their shelf. I'm included in that. I always thought it'd be so cool after 15 years of the project to have a physical representation of the project on my shelf. And unfortunately, the minimum order is 100, so I couldn't just make one for myself. So I made 100 of them. I give them to my staff as a thank you for helping me, and then I sell the rest. I keep about 5 back for my family. I give about 15 or so to staff, 1 for myself, obviously. And that means about 75 got sold on eXoDOS 4. With eXoDOS 5, we did a few more runs because a lot of people were interested in it. And it was really helpful because I have personally spent over $10,000 buying games off of eBay. And our fund off of selling eXoDOS 5 raised about $600 for the fund. And we've used that over the past year to buy several games that were missing and get them brought into the collection. So thank you for everyone who's donated and bought a box and helped us preserve games that we didn't have. Thank you for watching the video. Thank you for following along with the project. If you have questions about eXoDOS or things I didn't cover, please comment. I will be happy to follow up and address all of it. Have a great day.